heard the gentleman on the phone speaking about the reopening of some of the sugar estates. So maybe I'd start a press conference from that issue, because he was just speaking on his phone, finding out a bit more about the reopening of the sugar estates. And we're just in the dark, in the opposition, we're just as much in the dark as you are in the media. And in today's newspapers, if you look at two issues, just two issues, you will see a clear demonstration of phenomenal incompetence on the part of this government. On the sugar issue, we have been bombarded with propaganda from the government that the debt of Gaisuco is over $80 billion. It's not so. When you adjust the debt for long-term debt, for pension liabilities, etc., the debt is less than $15 billion, the short-term debt. We've been told that the government, there is no future for sugar. We can't afford putting subsidy into the sugar industry any longer, because sugar has no future. The cost of living is the cost of production is too high. And now, suddenly, the government, well, on the basis of those issues, the government decided to close the sugar industry, or 4 estates, and said, we just have to get out of sugar. And then suddenly, today, we've seen in the headlines that the government will restart some of these factories. Yes, some of these factories. So we need to understand what's the thinking of this government. Does it sit down, go through the numbers, verify the numbers for us before it makes a decision as critical as the one it did to close almost a 300 years industry? 300 years. In 3 years' time, they've practically shut down more than half of that industry. And then, on the basis of faulty analysis, etc., and then on a whim, suddenly decided to reopen some of these factories, claiming they have a bright future. Claiming they have a bright future now. What goes on in this government? Secondly, the president says, we will not renegotiate the ExxonMobil contract, but the contract is before the cabinet now. Now, one would think a contract like that in a sector that could change our lives in Guyana would have been subjected to cabinet discussion and approval before it was signed. So now, suddenly, the president says, we've signed this, we have no intention of reviewing it, but it is before cabinet for review, after the fact. So what if the review finds that, like most people have found, that the contract is horrible, a horrible one, an incompetently negotiated one? Then what should be our position as a country? So no government in the world works this way, with such levels of incompetence. 2 of the largest industries that they treat in such a cavalier manner. This can only point to incompetence, that this president And this group of people who run our country now, a small group there, they don't have a clue about what they're doing. And the things that they do with such impunity and certainty, if you listen to them, they have all the answers, are going to harm the lives of all Guyanese for generations to come because of their incompetence. And you have two major examples of that in today's press conference itself. A third issue that I want to add to the three, because there are large numbers of these issues of incompetence. We saw last year, or in the 2017 budget, they put on some new taxes in the mining sector. In the 2018 budget, they reversed those taxes. 2017 budget, they put some taxes on the education sector. In 2018, they reversed those. Another sign of incompetence. But listen to Minister Patterson talking about the bridge. He said, and this is in the Kaichor News, I think, I don't have the exact date here, but you can get it. He said that the aim is to have at least 3 contractors who would provide. No, let me start before that. The Public Infrastructure Minister clarified why there were no provisions in the 2018 budget for the new river crossing. So point 1, there's no money in the budget for the river crossing. He said that the aim is to have at least 3 contractors who would provide proposals either to fund the bridge directly or to have a public-private partnership with the government. Now, a government doesn't, imagine our whole government waiting on 3 contractors that they handpick to decide what model we're going to use to finance this bridge. The contractors have to determine that, not the government. Nowhere in the world this happens. When we built the Berbice Bridge, we decided right at the beginning that we wanted a public-private partnership. We developed a prospectus. We developed a financial model for the bridge. We changed the laws to facilitate a public-private partnership. We went out to tender for investors in the bridge. That is how you approach it. That is a government approaches it. Patterson is saying, oh, we're handpicking 3 people, and they would tell us what they want to do, whether they want to fund this bridge directly or they want to do a public-private partnership. And then he goes on to say, we'd like to do prudent financing, drops in a large word there, when we would have finished assessing the next quarter or 2 and the contractors have arrived at a certain amount, we will know the extent of financing we will need, if any, on the part of government, and we are going to approach the Assembly for supplementary that will be in June this year. Now, first of all, this is total garbage by a minister. You can't get a supplementary if there is no original provision. That's one, there is no provision in the budget. How are you going to get a supplementary? That's one. And 2, the contractors would be leading this project. They will determine, the contractors will determine what they want first of all, and then he'll go to Parliament to ask for money for it. Only an incompetent government will act this way. We have seen so many signs of incompetence. Now, the People's Progressive Party's position on this bridge, we will not support any bridge that will have to open again. We're going to support the government if it goes with a high level bridge that is fixed, that has no opening. And once it is transparently pursued, we'll support the government fully on that. But we are not supporting any bridge that is a medium level bridge that still has to be open. because we don't want to be stuck with such a project in the next 2 years. Because if we're stuck with it, and when we get into office, we'll have to continue something that will not be in the best interest of Guyana. We need a fixed level bridge that would last 50 years into the future with no opening, like Suriname did over its rivers. And we will not support, we made it clear, but we will support the government if it transparently pursues this project, defines the parameters, and it is a fixed level, it's a fixed high level bridge that will end it, because we don't want to be stuck with projects of this nature. So I've just given you about things in the news only recently. 3 examples or 4 examples of how incompetent our government is. On the other issue, we have heard very little about the corruption. You know, the drug bond, we were told by Valda Lawrence, when pressed, why are they keeping this corrupt contract in place for another year? She said, oh, the budget was made for the entire year, but we have no intention of keeping the contract for the rest of, for 2018. We will terminate this contract in about 2 months' time. So we're in February now. We are awaiting the termination of this contract, a contract in which there was no tender, and we're paying nearly $70,000 a month for a bottom house. That's what we're paying, $70,000, over $14 million, somewhere around that level. And that is one contract, trust me, that a PPP will definitely look into. That is one contract that we will definitely look into, because all the questions raised by the media have been unanswered so far about how did this person know of this opportunity when it wasn't publicly advertised, and why is it that this government hangs on to this contract that is so bad for so many years? Why is it that they're defending it? Who is responsible? So you recall, and President Granger likes to say, oh, I'm not aware of these issues, etc. Bring the evidence. Well, he appointed a 3-person committee to review this contract. And that's why I believe they're all part of it. And they concluded it was perfect. The contract was perfect. Secondly, I've seen the Auditor General indicate that he will conclude his audit of the Durban Park project, although he has not received the financial information requested. Now, you would recall that when they were pursuing this project in Parliament, there was a debate, and they said the PPP spent $38 million on building up the land at Durban Park and it was a waste of time. We built up the land, and we just allowed bush to grow on it. And the minister who was presenting the case pointed out, when the bid was issued for filling up the land, and who won the contract. Imagine that was done some maybe 13, 14 years ago, and they still could have found documents to show when the tender went out and who won the bid. We finished this project just 2 years ago, and we can't find any document about the bidding process, and who the contractors were, to who supplied the material, etc. $1.4 billion now, not 38 million any longer, 1.4. But we can't find the details of a bidding process that was concluded 2 years ago. Yet they found one elements of this bid for filling up the place that was done 12, 13 years back. It tells you a pattern. And then you recall President Granger himself saying that Rupert Rupnarine was part of a private company that did this work. And Rupert Rupnarine distanced himself from it. Patterson himself said that was done by a private company, I don't know which company. And then weeks later, he came to the parliament to ask for money, some $900 million, to pay this private company for works done there. So President Granger knows about this. And then you recall the person who got a bid, one of their friends from New York. We have a lot of pictures with President Granger and Nagamoto and all going to his place in New York, who never supplied anything in Guyana, suddenly getting a contract at GRDB for $426 million. And when asked how did he get the contract without any bids, the explanation from the government, well, he went to see the Minister of Agriculture and he told him he can supply the fertilizer at a cheaper rate. That replaces the bidding process now. Well, that same person now has gotten a multi-million, in fact, over $1 billion of works in our supply contract in the health sector. Remember, he's never supplied anything anymore. With a limited form of tender that they excluded all of the traditional suppliers from. And now he is in partnership with a government minister, and it's moving along. Another one. So this is a pattern. I can give you so many cases and that where corruption has now emerged. Almost every single ministry from the ministerial level, you're being shaken down. Gun licenses, everything else. And look at I've asked President Granger to support our request that the country hires an international firm that is specialized in tracing people's assets abroad. For almost 2 years now, I've been making this request of him to trace the assets of Guyanese or politicians from the former government, former presidents, as well as the current one. Trace their assets abroad and present a report to Guyana. So we will know what buildings they own, what bank accounts they own, if they own shares in companies, etc. And then the Guyanese public will see what people own abroad and whether they legitimately accumulated those things. The president has ignored that request because I believe that they'll be totally embarrassed to see what has happened in just 3 years with resources stashed abroad by members of this government. They're totally embarrassed. And so we need to keep the media, hopefully, and civil society needs to keep pressing that point. Let us hire the best international firm. The government could do this to trace the assets. We will support them fully to trace people's assets. So President Granger cannot absolve himself from all of these things. He knows about it. In fact, he made excuses for the Durban Park one and the other ones. He is ultimately responsible. Another thing that bothers me too is that apart from the tons of taxes that they put on basic things in the 2017 budget, so on medical supplies, now you pay VAT on 46 food items that you didn't have to pay VAT on. And the increase in all the fees that they put on government services, like basic fees, licenses, etc. All of those were increased tremendously. The rice farmers and some of the cattle rearers in Region 5 had their land prices increased by several 100%, like $3,500 to $15,000, so many of them, etc., per acre per year. So all of these things are creating more hardships for ordinary people. But we have also seen they want to raise the water tariffs now. So it seems as though there is no end to this. This group of people promise a better life, lower cost of living, but the water tariffs are going to go up now. The university now already moving up the service charges. I saw the price of fuel went up significantly, gas, and we used to use the tax system as an adjuster. When the price of fuel is high, we bring the taxes low, down low. We adjusted the excise tax to a low level so that it balances off the market. When the fuel prices fall or are lowered in the international market, we adjust the taxes back upwards. So you have some like evening out of the market. They keep raking in the large sums again without making the adjustments. So the consuming public has to pay this cost, like what they did on the electricity bill. When the price of fuel tumbled from $120 to about $30 a barrel, rather than adjust the electricity prices downwards, they kept it at the old rate. And that as a result of this, GPL in 3 years raked in now nearly over $25 billion from the public, because had the adjustment been made. So all of these things are leading to an increase in cost of living for people. They have no concern about how these things impact on people. And on GPL itself, there is so much confusion now about the 50 megawatts of power or installed capacity. That's what we thought, because they went out for equipment to be supplied to GPL. There is no clarity about this project. So if you go out for 50 megawatts now, either through government-owned or a build-own operate, even if it's your buying power model, then and it's going to be purely supplied by gas. Then you have to tell us more about how the gas will come into Guyana. Now, who has the facility to bring gas and to thaw the gas and do all of that? And what the price, if it's a build, own, operate model, which is buying power, what is the price that the government will conclude the contract at for 25 years? That is called the power purchase agreement. You would recall they wanted to buy power from one of their financiers at a very high price per kilowatt hour. So we need to get details around that. But because that would mean that the power plant will come in place in a year and a half from now. But it seems as though they're confusing this power plant with gas coming in from ExxonMobil, because that gas is coming in 2022, if ever. If it's going to come in 2022. That's what ExxonMobil said to us. So you can't build a power plant now and wait for the gas to 2022. And that would not help our current blackout situation. As I pointed out, with us, our plan was to bring in 160 megawatts of new power in 2017, mid-2017, through a miler. So we didn't have to invest more in fossil fuel plants. But they're not going to have that. What are their plans to make sure that the situation doesn't deteriorate? We don't hear clarity. We don't have clarity. My worry is that what they're doing now, they're setting us up for massive power outages and shortages of power in the future. And when that happens, they will bring in barge units in or bring in sets. And then we'll have to conclude deals with some private people at massive sums per kilowatt hour, power purchase agreements. So this year, there's total confusion in this sector. And frankly speaking, I believe we're going to have serious outages problem in the future, which adds to people's costs too. So I don't know where we're going, because even the things that they promise on, the free education, cheaper education, they've turned their back on those promises. Lower cost of living, back on their promises. The jobs, we already know, they made it clear. Our job is not our work in government is not to create jobs. You can go and sell cook-up or whatever, planting chips, and that's your business. You know, that's for Guyanese now. Forget all of our graduates and everybody else. So these are just some areas I wanted to talk about. Now I wanted to deal with one issue in particular. So in today's Chronicle, I've seen the president talking about AG's advice to determine way forward in relation to the appointment of the Chancellor, substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. Well, if this president is awaiting advice from this AG, our AG, we're in for big trouble, because this Attorney General has proven over and over again his inability to deal with complex issues. But this is a straightforward one. So not complex, actually I should say simple issues. His inability to deal even with simple issues. Now, that's point one. For a long time, the country knows, and let me start off by looking at, I saw yesterday, and I need to put this back on record, that the newsroom carried a story saying, repeating the Gina line, and that is a regular feature in the newsroom, repeating the Gina line, that I rejected. I didn't show up at the meeting with the president, and I rejected his nominees by issuing a press release. And that is far from the truth. I explained through a press release the circumstances through which I did not go to the meeting. But that press release from my office came out only after the office of the president posted on its Facebook page this picture of the president sitting there staring at 3 empty chairs and saying that I was a no-show. That was the caption, no-show by Jagdeo. So I did not reject the nominees by a press release. I issued a press release pointing out the circumstances through which I approached the matter, which is one, there was no confirmation. I wrote 3 letters because I promised the president that I will give him my position on 3 issues on that particular day. my position in relation to the nominees for the Integrity Commission, for a position in relation to the Teaching Service Commission, and the appointment of the Chancellor and Chief Justice. Not to break my promise, because I promised on that day I will do it, I wrote 3 letters, sent the letters to his office, called Harman at 4 o'clock, 1 full hour before the meeting, said to him, since we had not received confirmation, that I've written 3 letters, sent to your office around about 3 o'clock, and my positions are outlined in those letters, and should there be a need to meet again, I'm prepared to meet. So my press release that I issued was not a press release rejecting the nominees. It was a press release explaining all of those and releasing the letters that I sent to the president. That's the difference. The press release released the letters that I sent to the president. But it looks how the story carried it. Like I callously just issued a press release, without writing the president, getting back to him. Callously did a press release and said, I'm rejecting your nominees. That was the DPI line. And it's all the time gets reflected in that news outfit. So now, having said that, let's come back to this what the president said yesterday. The president said, he added, it is not desirable to continue the practice as acting, which existed for several years, and I would like to have a substantive appointment. The president made it clear that he would not allow the work of the judiciary to be stymied by a single person. It is a question of necessity. It is a question of necessity. The courts cannot be paralyzed by the behavior of one person. After the first meeting, I waited nearly a month, and I was, I would say, disappointed at the final outcome, but that is his constitutional decision he made. Now, the president, obviously this one person he's referring to is me. But who is this president still living in Guyana? I have a great, my concerns about him, that I've already expressed this publicly, that he lives in a different universe. But to be so duplicitous is dishonest, totally dishonest. Imagine this president was opposition leader from 2011 to 2015. He withheld his agreement for all of those years for the appointment of a substantive Chief Justice and a substantive Chancellor. He's been president nearly 3 years now, and he has refused until recently to submit a name for substantive appointment of a Chancellor and Chief Justice. So he has had from 2011 to 2018, nearly 2017, 6 years, he has been the single person who has stymied the appointment of a substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. He has now given me 1 month, and suddenly my behavior is what's holding up the appointment. Can you be more dishonest than this? Can you be more dishonest? This is pure, unadulterated dishonesty on the part of the president. Nothing else. You can't adulterate this. Dishonesty for all these years. Using this now as an excuse for maybe more unconstitutional acts in the future. Because if he moves to appoint a substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice, he will not only go in the face of the Constitution. He would not only be violating the Constitution, but the excuse that he's using to do that will be spurious. And there is no excuse for violating the Constitution. So just imagine this. For so many years, almost 7 years, he has held up the appointment of the substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. And I don't see how the work of the judiciary is being stymied, because the judiciary functioned in all those years. The 12 years, let's go back to even further, the 12 years that the PNC APNU withheld their agreement for the appointment of a substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. But the judiciary was functioning. And now we have an acting Chancellor and Chief Justice, and I think they're doing a good job in the position. So this is all an excuse, and that's why I say, how could you be so dishonest? It's either he forgot about it, maybe it's a memory failure. Like if it's not dishonesty, it has to be a failure of memory. Now, the last time I spoke here, I reiterated our support for the government, full support for the government on the question of our borders, the integrity of our borders, or territorial integrity or national sovereignty. And today I wish to restate that. I've been president of Guyana for over 12 years, and so I'm acutely aware of the need for confidentiality in the conduct of border affairs. But I do believe that any government has to balance the need for confidentiality with the necessity of keeping our public informed. And particularly when there are enhanced threats to our border. And right now, I believe that there is an active threat to our territorial integrity, and that our government is not forthcoming enough in addressing that threat and informing the public of the nature of the threat. But it is an enhanced threat. And I don't say these words lightly, because I've been president for several years. I do have people who talk to me from various places. And whatever this threat is, they will have our full solidarity, but the public needs to be made aware of this threat. This doesn't belong to APNU or to the coalition government alone, or Guyana, or our territorial, the safeguarding of our integrity, because it's the people of this country who will be called upon to defend it. So I'm not going to say any more about that, but I do believe that they are not forthcoming enough about this enhanced threat. So, thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, two questions, Roy and James Knightley News. Would the PDP be attending the flag raising ceremony next Thursday night? That's one. And secondly, if the news that we heard earlier is true that the government will be opening the East Coast and the Skeleton Station, what are your thoughts?
I hope that they should have never closed them. They should have never closed them in the first place. And if they can reopen them, that's fine with me. In fact, I'll support the reopening of all the estates. Not why stick with only these two? Why not reopen all the estates? The government must admit that it made a blunder. It treated the sugar industry in a political fashion when they should have done more technical work. We called on them to do the technical work. They never did. They made the wrong decision. And once they admit that, then that's fine. I think the country can, forgive that. Many sugar workers may not forgive them, but any form of reopening will be supported by the People's Progressive Party.
And the second question, would we see the party at the flag raising?
Okay, I have not spoken to our MPs as yet. I don't know what I will be doing on that day. Please don't make this a barometer test or a litmus test of our patriotism. Because if that's the case, for 20 odd years, the PNC was always absent from the flag raising ceremony. So if you make that a litmus test of patriotism, it meant they were not patriotic. They always were absent. But and we had a really bad experience one time. We don't want to repeat that experience. Frankly speaking, some of my people said they don't want to be humiliated again. But don't make that the litmus test. Yes.
The re-employment of workers at Skeleton and Borough.
Yes.
Could you say what are the implications for your status as unionized employees?
Dennis, I can't say that now because I don't have any details. I just read the story in the paper, just like you. Maybe the reporters have issues the same way you have issues. I have a number of issues too, but because the government has just made I don't know if it's a government's decision again or because they've been so confused recently. One time you hear, the letter shouldn't have gone out, the letter went out, etc. So next thing I hear someone from the government, I wouldn't be surprised to say, we can't do it. So I myself would like to get all the details about this before I venture into any educated sort of comment.
Mr. Jagdeo,
Yes.
Will you support the government sitting on Exxon to renegotiate the contract at this point in time? Will you support the government?
But the government should first of all agree that there are elements of this contract that they could have done better on, that they did a bad job negotiating the contract. The problem is that they keep, Trotman really make these asinine defense of the contract. And so when they have that acknowledgement that they have incompetently gone to the table, that they were not prepared enough to negotiate that contract, and they then define some areas, we are prepared to share our views at any moment, because this is a national patrimony. That's why we call for a non-partisan approach and non-political. Take all the politicians out of the Petroleum Commission. Let's be arm's length. From the Petroleum Commission should be purely technically managed. And that would be good for long-term relations between the country and ExxonMobil too.
So you don't support after the negotiations?
No, at this point in time, I made it clear. I don't want to say next thing you're going to hear that we are killing investors. I pointed out a couple of things. Barama contract. We had big issues with the Barama contract. Oh my, all of these that we believe that were bad contracts before we got into office, we spoke out against them. But we made it clear that we would not renegotiate contracts because we were very worried about the signal it sends to the country. But there are areas of the contract that we believe in the ExxonMobil contract that this government sold out our birthrights by incompetent negotiations.
Mr. General, a follow-up. Sir, in light of your concern that the government has sold out this birthright, are you prepared as opposition leader to either table or support a motion in the Parliament for the renegotiation of these aspects of the contract that you have concerns about? So it is not a partisan position; it is a national position.
If the government comes with a motion of that nature, once the motion is in defense of Guyanese, I sit here. We were elected here to defend Guyanese, nobody else, and Guyana's interests. The 800,000 or how many of us who live in this country, and those who live abroad too, from the diaspora, we are elected to defend them. Nobody else, no company, nobody. And that will guide us. What is best for Guyanese and Guyana? Now, ExxonMobil has to do what's good for its shareholders. But that's my job. And anything that I see that will bring greater benefits to my country and my people, then we will support it. I'm telling you that. That's a generic position. So it doesn't have to go, we don't have to go into all the details because we don't know what the content of a motion of that nature would be. But that's my overall position on it.
Would you propose a motion then?
Because that is it. Then the next thing is that if it comes from us, it's seen as we are trying to undermine investments in Guyana. This is what they already say. This is what they would love to happen, that we are trying to undermine investments.
So if the government brings the motion, you will support it?
We will support that. Any motion, any public position that supports the interests of Guyanese people, I made that clear, that will see them get wealthier, better off, etc. in the long run using oil resources or any other resources. You can count on the PPP's support for that.
Sir, my question,
Yes.
on your, as pulling from your experience as leader or president of this country, it's more broad-based. Do you believe that this contract can be renegotiated?
You're asking me. I believe the law. I've had a whole set of people advising me, sending me documents, etc. I looked at it. Anything that any sovereign government negotiates with a second party, with another party, could be renegotiated if the other party agrees to come to the table. It could be done amicably. If the other party agrees to come to the table, it will be done amicably. If it pursues it and the other party does not agree with it, then you end up in a dispute. And so you don't know in this circumstance which of those, I believe, the amicable approach is the best suited one in this regard.
So in that stance, you would say it's best to approach Exxon first to ask.
No, I'm just giving you general positions. You didn't, yeah.
I'm saying in
You go
this-
specific in this case, but our
I'm saying
cabinet,
now in this case.
but what you're asking me to do, our cabinet has not decided this is a bad contract. They think this country,
No, I never said that you're talking.
No.
Two separate questions, yes?
Oh.
The first one is broad-based,
Yes.
if the contract could be renegotiated.
Yeah, sure.
And this one is more specific to this Exxon contract. That if the government feels now that it has been long, or there are substantive cases, and its own cabinet says you should. What is the approach? That's what I'm asking.
okay, so what I would hope is if that's the cabinet has statutory powers, the president, etc. If they manage the executive at this time, assuming they review this contract and they have an approach on it, I would think that and they want to approach it in a bipartisan manner, we will be willing to meet with them to talk about it. That's what I can say.
Mr. Jagdeo, a couple of
Yes.
security questions.
Yes.
In relation to what the president termed as the troubled period, now he said that there was a counterforce in operation. Are you aware of this counterforce and why the counterforce came into existence?
I don't know about counter forces. People describe different groups. Remember one time in the newspaper it used to be Phantom. It's been described as Phantom, counter force, whatever. I know that there were the criminals out there who were killing ordinary people. There may have been other groups of criminals who had engagement with those criminals who escaped and resided in Buxton. And then I know of the state trying to apprehend and to deal with all criminals. So, and the state was at my disposal as president. The state security apparatus that comprised over 6,000 people, that had the law on its side, all the weapons in the world, and that state apparatus, in the execution of its duties to go protect this country and to go after these criminals who were murdering people randomly of every single race, not a particular race alone, policemen, innocent victims, babies, etc., psychopaths who were killing people, that they encountered support from opposition from a political force who described the security forces' action as criminal, and that political force was APNU, who constantly talk about extrajudicial killing, who constantly held up some of these criminals as freedom fighters, who argued that for us to get peace in Buxton, we had to spend $350 million in infrastructure, who were negotiating on behalf of the insurgents, they call them, who were murdering people. That political leaders who used to visit the communities and talk to the women and children to support, to block the security forces. The moment they arrive, you have the others are firing high-power rifles at them, shooting at the police and the army. And then from the moment they move into the community, a group of women will come out and block them. And I remember also the fear in the residents of Buxton. They were scared of even talking to us because they will murder them. Like what happened to one group that they said was informed the police. I remember that. That's what I remember about it. And so if there was any counterforce against the criminals, it was the APNU people. Now you had, that's why I said we didn't need 20 or 50 drug dealers to help us when we had the security forces. Now, if you ask me if within the security forces we may have been undermined for political reasons, I'd say yes, too. But I can't, for example, Felix will never say yes, he did. But he was caught on tape talking to Basil Williams. And that's a different issue. But people, yes, what they call it, counter force, phantom, whatever, those were not pursuing any government agenda. In fact, they were early linkages between the groups, and I think they fell out. Like how you have gang warfare in other parts of the world, they fell out. That's what the intelligence report, I know, suggested to me. But they were not pursuing a national agenda. The security forces were. So I don't see why, as president, when I got all these soldiers and policemen, I needed anyone else.
But understanding all the forces that you had, the Prime Minister said he at one time he had to be wearing jackets, bulletproof vests. And
Who, the prime minister?
Ex-Prime Minister.
That he had to wear bulletproof vest?
Yes, yes.
I don't know about that, but I never wore a bulletproof vest in my life. There's one in my car, but never ever wore a bulletproof vest in my life. Never put it on. That's one, and I'm telling you, and I've been president for over 12 years. Secondly, and I walk around, you know, I walk in crowds, communities, etc. Secondly, let me don't say that. There were credible threats from the intelligence groups to my life directly from that group. And I just moved on with my life. You didn't see me using 20 outriders like our current president has. Imagine he had lived in that period. Half of the police force would be guarding him. Because right now, they're all, if he goes up to the airport, every corner on the East Bank, I have outriders, like fleets of vehicles following them. Ministers all got security, etc. Even through that crime wave, our ministers did not have personal security. Maybe it was naive, too. But now they have it, and that brings me to this growing crime. The stats, the reality on the ground is different than the statistics. We have a wave of crime and criminal activities, and all they do is to make excuses. Excuses. The government is clueless. Now that the president has had his report from the British consultant, and this report was supposed to change the whole future of crime fighting. You recall what he said, and that the PPP was bluffing in the past. Well, he's not bluffing. What changed from that day? What's going to happen? It is an inept government, incompetent government, even in the area you thought that they will be competent in with all this security outlook. They're incompetent even in that area.
But why did you reject the security reform back then?
I made it clear that the British program, that we were not going to trade sovereignty for that. And I made it clear that there were, like, the intrusive, I believe that Guyanese, if well trained, they can manage almost anything. We have to get advice from abroad, but we also have to expose our own people. We have big, just as big and maybe even better brains than many people abroad as Guyanese. Why do we have to keep sucking up to people all the time from overseas? I know, but we have to look at best practices, advice. That's my belief. As president and even now. And so one time, they around that same period, I met with Claire Short. Claire Short was the Secretary of State. Money that was supposed to come for security reform got sent to Afghanistan. And I'm saying this in public now. Money that went to Afghanistan got diverted because they went they went into the war. You know, when the invasion, they supported the invasion in Afghanistan. Money got diverted. Secondly, their £4 million, etc., they wanted the British soldiers to come here and do live firing in some areas close to the border. And I said, no live firing in Guyana. You can come and train as much as you want, but no live firing, because we have Amerindian communities and we have good relations with both, at least that time, with Venezuela and with Brazil. And we can't be seen in Latin America. We always had this perception that we work hard to get over by joining UNASUR and the others, that somehow we are still a colony of the UK. We take directions from the UK. So I know it was offensive to those countries if we allowed that sort of thing, but British soldiers can come here, they can train, they can use our training facilities, etc. But the live firing was an issue. And so those were some of the reasons. Not because we didn't want, and imagine, the same British government, I selected 4 of the people, 4 top persons, and I said from one of the 4, we will select the next commissioner. And we then sent them to the UK. And they did some training and they did some assessments. And I look at the reports, I also talked to people, and out of the 4, I knew Felix was probably not sympathetic to us politically, but he turned out to be the top candidate, and he was appointed. And so the reports could be looked at. We didn't stop collaborating with the British, but on this particular matter, I have to look out for the sovereignty of my country and relations with our neighbors and balance all of those out. Not to just suck up to anybody who come and say, oh, we give you £4 million, you can do, we just do everything you want. And so totally different approach. This is why it turns my stomach to see us groveling sometimes. Groveling, anytime a foreign mission comes here, it seems like though we're in awe. We can't treat Guyanese the same way. And as I said before, this is an integrated world. I don't have a problem with working with the rest of the world. We export our goods. We're small countries having good relations with everyone, but on equal footing. Guyanese not deficient. We're not deficient people.